Hi, readers. So, today's lesson is super sophisticated, but I think you are ready for it. So, as you know, we've been reading our biographies, and we know that biographies tell us about someone famous or important. And biographies don't just tell us about that person, they tell us how they became famous and what they did, what their challenges and struggles were. And they really build up to that big accomplishment and tell us how they got there. So, today I want to teach you that in narrative nonfiction, sometimes the author doesn't come out right away and tell you the main idea or why they wrote this book, what the big accomplishment is. But for it to be a well written story, there is a main idea, or you could maybe call it a reason to tell this story. Sometimes it helps to ask yourself when trying to figure out this main idea or why the author wrote the story, ask yourself, what did the main subject or person I'm reading about learn? Now, figuring out the main idea in a narrative nonfiction or a biography is a little bit trickier than, say, when we were doing our regular nonfiction expository books, such as Frogs and Toads. We were able to figure out boxes and bullets and main idea and supporting details by either reading the headings or the subheadings or looking for pop-out sentences. A lot of times the author would tell you what the main idea is. But you may have noticed when you were reading your narrative nonfiction books and biographies that the author doesn't come right out and say, the main idea of this story is, or this character learned. It's up to you to put together the information and figure that out. So let me give you some tips on how we can figure out the main idea of narrative nonfiction or the lessons learned, and then we're going to try it together. So let's take a look first of how we can figure this out. So to find the underlying main ideas and stories in narrative nonfiction, we can do the following. So I want you to think about at the beginning of the year when we wrote personal narratives. And remember how I told you to develop the heart of the story, stretch out that part. Well, we told you that because not just third graders do that, but all authors do that. You need to think and look for the parts of the book that are really stretched out. And usually that gives us a clue that this is a big lesson or a big idea in the story. So look for that heart of the story stretched out. That's usually a signal that this part is something important. You can also just ask yourself, what lesson did the character learn? Is there a message, a moral, a lesson learned, a sometimes in life moment? If you find a time in the story when the main character made a really big choice, usually there's a lesson attached to that choice. So if your person you're reading about had a moment where they had to make a big choice between something, usually there's a lesson learned there. You can also ask yourself, when the character meets challenges, what helps? Is there a life lesson in this for everyone? So when your main character comes across a problem, what did they do? What did they learn in that moment? Because I bet it can apply to people all over the world and in different situations. So today we're going to try this, not with Who Was Malala, just because it's a much bigger book. We're going to do it with a shorter biography about Ezra Jack Keats. So follow along with me, and as I'm reading, I want to think, what is the underlying main idea here? What are some things we're learning? What lessons are we learning from this biography? It's about Ezra Jack Keats, and he was an artist, as we're going to learn. Make my thing a little bit smaller. Okay. Benjamin Katz and Augusta Podgany were born in Warsaw, Poland. However, they did not meet until they had both emigrated to the United States. Continuing the Polish custom, their wedding was arranged by a matchmaker. After the marriage, the two settled in the Jewish quarter of Brooklyn, New York, in a two-family house at number 438 Vermont Street. Their third child, Jacob Ezra Katz, was born on March 11, 1916. Keats became interested in art at an early age. His mother encouraged his talent, but his father seemed only to criticize his ability. Working at Pete's coffee shop in Greenwich Village, Benjamin Katz knew how hard earning a living could be. He felt that his son could never really be successful as an artist. However, His father did purchase tubes of paint for Keats under the pretense of having traded bowls of soup to a starving artist. If you don't think artists starve, well, let me tell you. One man came in the other day and swapped me a tube of paint for a bowl of soup. Keats did win the approval of his father when he was paid 25 cents for painting an advertisement for a local store at the age of 8. Finally, Benjamin thought his son might be able to earn a living with his art as a sign painter. Okay, let's pause here for a second. So I want you to think, anybody else noticing here that the author kind of wrote a lot about about Keats' father relationship with his dad, right? And how they got along and didn't necessarily get along, how his dad criticized a lot of his work. So, maybe there's a lesson in here. Think to yourself, what could this be teaching us? What are we learning from this moment? What does this say about the main idea of the biography? Okay, let's keep going. When Benjamin Katz died on January 1935, Keats, on the day before his high school graduation, had to identify his father's body. For the first time, he learned that his father had been proud of his work. In his Caldecott Medal speech in 1963, Keats shared the experience. I found myself staring deep into his secret feelings. There in his wallet were worn and tattered newspaper clippings of the notices of the awards I had won. My silent admirer and supplier, he had been torn between his dread of my leading a life of hardship and his real pride in my work. Although Keats won 3 scholarships to art school, he was unable to attend. He worked to support his family by day and took art classes at night when he could. In 1937, he secured a job with the Works Progress Administration, WPA, working as a mural painter. After 3 years' time, Keats moved on to work as a comic book illustrator. Then, in 1942, Keats began work on the staff of Fawcett Publications, illustrating backgrounds for the Captain Marvel comic strip. On April 13, 1943, Keats entered the service of the United States Air Corps. Taking advantage of his skill as an artist, the Army trained him to design camouflage patterns. Keats was given an honorary discharge in 1945, and he returned to New York. Keats suffered a period of health problems and melancholy after his return home. 2 years after World War II, Jacob Ezra Katz legally changed his name to Ezra Jack Keats. This was most certainly a reaction to the anti-Semitic prejudices of the time. In 1954, Jubilant for Sure by Elizabeth Hubbard Lansing was published. The book was set in the mountains of Kentucky. The book set in the mountains of Kentucky was the first book Keats illustrated for children. Keats, in an unpublished biography, stated, "I didn't even ask to get into children's books." In the 11 years that followed, Keats illustrated 54 books. All right, let's pause here. We can go on to read more about it, but we're going to pause here and just think about what lessons have we learned? Did he face any challenges? What did you gain from this? I'll give you a second to think about that. All right, one thing that really stuck out to me was that he didn't go to art school, even though he was given a scholarship. But he was still able to become an artist anyway because he took night classes and he worked really hard. I also noticed he held a whole bunch of different types of jobs between drawing comics, painting murals, even camouflage. Again, this shows that he's a really hard worker. Is anybody else thinking that the lesson we can learn here is you can reach your goals if you work really hard? Even his father didn't believe in him in the beginning, but he continued to work at what he loved and worked really hard, and he now is a famous artist. Okay, so readers, the way I was able to take the information from the biography we read, and not once in there did the author state that the main idea of this is you need to work hard to achieve your goals. No, we were able to take all the information we read and figure out that lesson on our own. Your job today is going to be doing the same thing, figuring out that lesson learned or that main idea from a biography you are currently reading, or maybe a new shorter one that you're going to read, and tell me that. You're going to tell me on Padlet, and I'll have the directions in our assignment. But let me show you some student examples from the past, from biographies they read. So this student was reading about Martin Luther King Jr., and the lesson he learned was that oftentimes most people just give up. People that change the world don't give up, though. This was another student who read about Martin Luther King. And it said Martin wanted to be free, but segregation got in the way, so it didn't happen. Then Martin made the I Had a Dream speech and still did it. Even an example is how the Ku Klux Klan set off a bomb in a church, and it didn't stop him. This person read about Albert Einstein, and they said it is important to use your brain for good things because Albert Einstein regretted making the atomic bomb. Yet, all he wanted to do was stop the war. And here's another one. Martin Luther King Jr. taught me to speak up if something is wrong. And let me just show you one more. This person read about Barack Obama. He said, Obama really has a big heart to help other African Americans to have a better life and to have the chances and choices he had experienced. So again, readers, as you are reading your biographies, I want you to think, what is the lesson you're learning? What is the main idea? And then you're going to share it with all of us on Padlet. All right, off you go.